YouTube, welcome in. Jake Asman with you. Mike Meltser from Sirius XM's A Mad Dog Sports Radio joining me here. We are reacting in real time. The breaking news, the New York Jets have traded quarterback Sam Darnold to the Carolina Panthers. They get back a 6th-round pick in this year's draft, and in next year's draft, so 2022, the Jets get a 2nd-round pick and a 4th-round pick. So there are certainly a lot of different angles to talk about with this trade. Mike, you're a diehard Jets fan. I'm a diehard Jets fan. I appreciate you hopping on with me here on short notice to talk about a trade that we saw coming. We just didn't know which team. And now, the debate, what should the Jets do with Darnold? It's over. They trade him to the Carolina Panthers. Give me your initial thoughts there, and then we'll talk about this trade and answer a bunch of questions and kind of react in real time to the news that's coming down with Darnold.
All right, initial takeaway. Not surprised by the deal. I expected at some point before the draft for obvious reasons. I don't care what nonsense Josh McCown was spewing on Friday to Rich Cimini over the weekend. The compensation, I think, is decent. It's not great. Obviously, this year you only get a 6th-round pick. Next year they get a 2nd-round pick and a 4th-round pick. Typically, there's like a discount value applied to draft picks in the future. And what that means is like a 2nd-round pick in 2022 is considered like a 3rd-round pick this year. But you could look at the other way and say, hey, once we transfer the calendar next January, all of a sudden you got a 2nd-round pick. So I think the compensation is decent, certainly not overwhelming. It gives the Jets, 2 first-round picks and 2 2nd-round picks next year, along with the Jamal Adams trade from last year. I think it's a solid deal. I kind of feel bad because I like Sam the guy. His efficiency metrics on Football Outsiders have been dreadful for 3 years. And I just think, Jake, and I think you and I are basically on the same page, Sam had not played well for a couple of years. He had not, and particularly this 3rd year, like he had not taken that leap that you wanted, and they were picking 2nd in a talented quarterback draft. And the opportunity cost of drafting a quarterback and resetting the clock on that rookie quarterback contract, I think it was too much for the Jets to pass on.
I agree with everything you just said. What pains me, though, Mike, even though we knew this was coming, even though I was very vocal in wanting the Jets to deal Sam, is that, man, they failed this kid, and he didn't get a fair shake. And we don't know truly what Sam Darnold is. I will say, as a Jet fan, though, I'm happy he's going to the NFC. Like, that was one of the first takeaways I had when I saw the deal. It's like he's going to a team where he has a chance to be the guy. He's going to a team where they don't play the Jets. It's not going to impact the Jets going forward. And I'm rooting for Sam. But as you said at the top, there was no scenario where Darnold was back after they took a quarterback at 2. It was either you stick with Sam and trade out a number 2, or you're drafting a quarterback and trading Sam. And all signs pointed to that. So overall, though, I will say, you prefer the picks, I guess, to be in this year's draft. But if you can get a 2nd and a 4th for Sam Darnold, and as you said and pointed out, you now have 2 1s next year and 2 2s and 2 4s. I mean, the Jets are still loaded with assets, not just this year, but next year as well. And if you're trying to build around a rookie quarterback, which clearly they're now going to do after they take probably Zach Wilson 2nd overall, they have all these resources, all these assets to do exactly that. So it's bittersweet. I hope the fresh start for Sam serves him well. And now at least the Jets get the organization on the same page. Robert Saleh, handpicked by Joe Douglas. Now Joe Douglas gets to handpick his next quarterback. Had he stuck with Sam Darnold becomes his guy, no longer Mike McCagnon's guy. Now he gets his quarterback, and the Jets now have 22 total draft picks over the next 2 years.
And there's this idea that I've heard, Jake, that, if you take Zach Wilson at number 2 overall, all of a sudden, like, instead of using that on an offensive tackle or a receiver, then it hurts your ability to build your team. But keep in mind, with the extra 1st-round pick this year, with the 2nd-round pick they have, that's 2 premium picks considering how bad the Jets were in 2020. And so you have 2 other picks to help build around Zach Wilson. You can take an offensive tackle at number 21, I think it is. They can take a guard or another weapon for Zach Wilson, who I think it's going to be. They can build their team with the draft picks they have. And the other part is, like, based on what the Jets have done in free agency, which is make 2 big splashes, but be sort of conservative in general in their monetary spending, like, they're not expecting to win the Super Bowl this year. I think they're expecting to be just a better football team, but this is not going to be like a finished product, essentially.
No doubt. And I think they look at it like, hey, we're still building. If it's not just Sam Darnold versus Zach Wilson or Sam Darnold versus Justin Fields, it needs to be emphasized over and over again, Mike. This was about Sam Darnold's contract versus a rookie's contract. And getting a rookie quarterback on the cheap now for 4 or 5 seasons is better business than sticking with a quarterback in his 4th year that may or may not be good. We still don't know. Like, do I think Sam Darnold's elite? No. Do I think he could be Alex Smith or Ryan Tannehill? Yes. And if that's all he's going to be, then I'm sorry, you're not winning anything of consequence if that's all Sam ends up being. So now you get the entire organization on the same page, and you put the next quarterback in position here with a better offensive line, most importantly, better coaching. It's just a much better situation for a young quarterback. It's a shame. Sam, if he was coming out now, would be walking into an ideal situation for a young player. Now It's going to be Zach Wilson, most likely, that gets the benefit of what the Jets are surrounding him with. Competent coaching, we believe, and certainly improved players all over the roster.
The point about Tannehill I find interesting because it seems, Jake, and I know you've probably observed this, that people nationally throw out this Tannehill idea. I think there's a giant misconception of who Ryan Tannehill was in Miami and what Sam Darnold has been with the Jets. Ryan Tannehill was fine with the Dolphins. He just wasn't like a clearly above average player. Go look at Tannehill's numbers that he put up in Miami and compare them to Darnold's. Like, I'm looking at it right now. Tannehill across different seasons, 24 touchdowns, 17 picks. 27 touchdowns, 12 picks, 24 and 12, completion percentages of 66% in a year, 67. Like, he wasn't great by any means. I think he was a solid quarterback. These numbers are far superior to the ones that Darnold was putting up, especially in years 1 and year 3 with the Jets. I think year 2 for Sam was some substantial improvement, but like, he never put up the kind of numbers that Tannehill put up in Miami. And then you still have the bigger question, which is, okay, clearly Tennessee has been able to unlock more from Ryan Tannehill, but there is the question of, like, if Ryan Tannehill is your quarterback, like, how talented of a team do you need to win a Super Bowl? You would say pretty damn talented.
No, absolutely. And, it's just, this was the right move all along. Like, I couldn't argue for the scenario in good conscience that sticking with Sam and trading out's the right move, unless, and this was always the caveat I had, Mike, unless the Jets felt that Sam Darnold was going to be a top 10 quarterback. Like, you can't keep Sam if his ceiling is only, he's Ryan Tannehill. Like, Ryan Tannehill is a nice player, but look at the circumstances you just talked about that it took for Ryan Tannehill to finally maximize his potential as a player. Like, no one's picking the Titans to win a Super Bowl this year. No one's going to think that the Titans are going to be this, transcended team going forward. The only way you win year after year in the NFL is if you have a top 10 quarterback that can elevate a roster, even if, on a given year, your roster is not great. So do I know if Zach Wilson's going to be great? I don't, but I'll take my chances on finding out what he can be over banking on Sam Darnold in year 4, when then you got to pick up a 5th-year option for $20 million over, rolling the dice with Sam. I think this is a good move for both sides. It gives Sam a fresh start. I think he'll win that job over Teddy Bridgewater in Carolina. And I think from the Jets standpoint, you couldn't, under any circumstance, as you talked about at the top, you couldn't go into the summer and training camp where Darnold's still here and then there's a rookie behind him. It doesn't work. This had to be done. And now, the Jets, I basically told you, we're taking a quarterback at 2. So anyone who tweets me or writes in the YouTube comments, no, it's a smokescreen, Jake, they're not taking a quarterback. My response to you is you're wrong. They're taking a quarterback. So that's all you need to know. And apparently Joe Douglas has just released a statement, Mike, as we're doing this in real time. So I'll pull that up as you react to some more Darnold commentary. We will take some questions as well. A lot of people engaged on YouTube and Periscope. Write in your thoughts on the Darnold trade. Best comments and questions we'll read over the air. But Mike, continuing to look at this trade from a Carolina standpoint, do you like the fit for Darnold going to the Panthers?
I do like the fit with Darnold going to Carolina. And this kind of relates to something I think people struggle with, which is a player in the NFL is not like a player in a vacuum. My analysis will really depend on the situation. Like, I think if the Patriots, for example, ended up with Jimmy Garoppolo, I think that's ideal for him, and I think that's ideal for them. I didn't think that about Jimmy with the 49ers before they made the trade up to 3. So even though it's the same player in a different situation, it's a totally different deal. So I look at Carolina. Number one, as far as the 5th-year option, that looms for them as well. But because they're the acquiring team and they never actually drafted Darnold 3 years ago, theoretically, if Darnold plays well this season, they can work out their own contract. And I don't know that they necessarily need to worry all that much about that 5th-year option hanging over them. Joe Brady has done an awesome job as an OC the last 2 years. LSU in 2019, very solid job with Teddy Bridgewater and company in 2020. They had a couple 1,000-yard receivers, and this was without Christian McCaffrey for most of the season. So I look at that team, and while they lose Curtis Samuel, they still have DJ Moore. They have Robbie Anderson. Sam likes throwing deep to Robbie Anderson, so he has that connection. The running game should be pretty good with McCaffrey back, and he feels like one of those quarterback's best friends sort of guys. Offensive line seems okay, and you have a pretty solid up-and-coming head coach in Matt Rule. If I'm Sam Darnold, this is a pretty solid situation to end up in. It might not be as great as ending up in like San Francisco, hypothetically, but this is pretty good with Joe Brady and those weapons.
No doubt. And here's the statement from Joe Douglas here. Quote, "I want to publicly acknowledge the commitment, dedication, and professionalism Sam displayed while with the Jets. He's tough-minded. He's a talented football player whose NFL story has not been written yet. While all these things are true, the move is in the short and long-term best interest for both this team and him. We thank Sam for all his work on behalf of this organization and wish him well as he continues his career." So the Jets do the classy thing with the statement for Darnold, yada, yada, yada. The other news from this is it just came out. The Panthers are picking up his fifth-year option for $18.8 million. So they're making a commitment, Mike, to Sam Darnold being their guy, because now that is fully guaranteed. They're on the hook for $18.8 million next year. So Sam
Repeat
gets
that
year
number.
4.
Repeat that number for me.
$18.8 million, fifth-year option.
Huh.
So
Boy, does that surprise you? Does that surprise you as much as it kind of surprises me?
I think they had no choice because you can't lose him for nothing in free agency. Then you have a Trubisky situation if you don't want to put the franchise tag on him for $35 million. So they're committed to Darnold for at least another year. And then the other angle on this from a national standpoint, this means Carolina at 8 is no longer taking a quarterback and no longer moving up for a quarterback. People speculated they could move up to number 5 with the Bengals, or maybe an in-division trade for number 4. That opens the door for another team to move up to number 8, and Carolina could recoup some of the draft picks they traded away to the Jets. So maybe a team like New England now can move up from 15 to 8 to get a quarterback. Just throwing that out there. So this move doesn't just impact the Jets or the Panthers. It has major ramifications for various teams across the league.
This impacts the whole league. I mean, the whole quarterback market this offseason has been nothing short of fascinating between Matt Stafford, Jimmy Garoppolo, Jared Goff. The 49ers move up to 3. This Sam Darnold deal, I'm probably missing 1 or 2 developments, but it's just been fascinating with the biggest dominoes, Russell Wilson, Deshaun Watson, not having really fallen or close at that point. And I guess the other angle is, reading the tea leaves, the Carolina Panthers were desperate for a quote-unquote franchise quarterback. I think this team would have been the one most desperate to trade for Deshaun Watson. And by virtue of making this move, I think they have now taken themselves out of any Watson quote-unquote sweepstakes, even though those are, I think, on hold as a result of his legal battles right now. And so I think Carolina was prepared to offer like the moon, the sun, and the stars for Watson, and now they will be out of that as a result of this trade. So that's another angle to this one.
No doubt. Justin Mader writes in on Facebook, with a quarterback pick 2nd overall, the Jets become the first team in the common draft era to draft a top 3 pick with a quarterback in a 4-year span. So yes, the Jets are making history with this move, but you know what? They failed Sam. Sam did not play well enough where they could justify sticking with him. And it's as simple as that. If you don't believe Sam Darnold is capable of being an elite player, you can't roll the dice in year 4. You have to make this move. And now, Mike, it comes down to this. If they're going to move on from Sam, and they got to get it right. I mean, it's This was a logical move, but now Joe Douglas has to be right that Zach Wilson, if it is Wilson, and it looks like it will be, he has to be right that this is the next great quarterback in this league. Because if he's wrong, we're going to be looking back on this trade and being like same old Jets.
Isn't the big thing, though, and this is not just the Jets, but what the Eagles did with Carson Wentz, what the Rams did with Jared Goff, I think we're going to see more of this, where a team invests a lot in a quarterback 1 year. It doesn't work out a couple of years later. They're not going to double down on the previous quarterback. They're going to go and get somebody else. Like, does it cost the Jets the opportunity cost in seeing what Darnold becomes? Yes. But when you can get a quarterback on a rookie contract, it is just that valuable. Like, I understand the Jets invested a lot more in Darnold because they moved up with all those second-round picks to get him 3 years ago. the 49ers invested a lot less in Jimmy Garoppolo, right? Only a second-round pick in the middle of 2017, but it ended up costing them a lot because, Jimmy got hurt, he wasn't healthy, and so they ended up having to fix that issue by throwing 3 first-rounders at it. And I just think we're going to see more of this. We're going to see teams like that stat that Justin put out, the first team in the common draft to take 2 top 3 picks at quarterback in a 4-year span. I know it's not the same stat. We just saw Arizona take Josh Rosen 1 year, trading up for him and then taking Kyler Murray the next year. I think we're going to see much more of that. This will not be an uncommon thing in the NFL moving forward.
Sometimes you just got to admit your mistake. We saw Arizona do it, of course, with Josh Rosen, and that kind of, opened the door for more of these type of scenarios to play out. I always go back to this too with the Darnold stuff, Mike. Joe Douglas didn't draft him. If he commits to Darnold as his quarterback, even if it's like, well, we're committing to him because look at all the picks we could get. Joe Douglas might not be around to make all those picks if Sam Darnold flames out next year and the Jets are still looking for a quarterback. And by accident, they're going to win more than 2 games a year from now. By accident, they're probably going to be picking, outside the top 5. And look how much it costs San Fran just to move up and get a quarterback. You're sitting there second overall. You get your pick of the litter in a loaded quarterback draft. So you got to go and get your guy if you're the Jets and Joe Douglas. And also, I'll tell you what, maybe this is like my crazy thought process, always thinking the worst with the Jets. I think the fact that the Niners wanted Zach Wilson, that Steve Young came out and he would know he's close with Zach Wilson. And in that, he said basically, we all know the Niners' preference is Wilson, but they're not going to be able to get him. I think the fact that a team like the Niners, the offensive genius of Kyle Shanahan wanted Zach Wilson, that makes me feel pretty good that Wilson's going to be good if the Niners of all teams were a team that wanted Zach Wilson with that pick.
Yeah, and I'm sure the Jets had the exact conversation, Jake, that you're talking about, which is, let's say we keep Sam. We're probably going to be better this season. We have a real head coach instead of maybe the worst coach in the NFL. We're going to win more games just on accident. And even if we had traded down like the Dolphins did and gotten those extra first-round picks, that's great. And you can help build a really good team, with those picks and maybe get a quarterback. But there are no guarantees as your team gets better. Like in the game of musical chairs, a quarterback, I look at some teams out there like Chicago, Washington, Denver. I think these are some very talented teams in different ways, but it's hard for them to get quarterbacks because they're picking so low in the draft. Like Washington wasn't that good this past season. They have an elite front 7. They signed William Jackson. They have good weapons, but they had to sign Ryan Fitzpatrick to get to the playoffs. Like I think Washington would be, a real contender with a quarterback, but it's not easy to get one if you have this philosophy of like, let's build a team and then get the quarterback. I think that is a lot easier said than actually done.
Mike Meltser with us here. My name is Jake Asman. If you're new to the channel on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button. It goes a long way. Mike is a national radio host on Sirius XM's Mad Dog Sports Radio. He grew up in Connecticut. He is a diehard Jets fan, as am I, even though we both now live here in Houston, Texas. And you can follow Mike on Twitter at Mike Meltser. We'll read some more comments and some questions here. I see we have 125 people tuning in on YouTube, which is awesome. Thank you so much for spending some time with us as we react to the deal that we saw coming. We just didn't know when. The Jets trade Sam Darnold to the Carolina Panthers. Fatty writes in here on YouTube, Mike, teams like the Niners wanted Zach Wilson. Well, duh, same offense as the Jets, so they both should want him. That's true, Fatty, but I point the name Fatty, by the way, love it. Don't know what I'm saying, but all right. Solid name indeed. My point is, like, yes, they run a similar offense, but the fact that Kyle Shanahan is the guy who everyone wants to copy, and he wanted Zach Wilson, I think that's a good sign that the Jets actually, know what they're doing and know how to evaluate some talent here. So as much as I would be okay with Justin Fields, I'm not as down on him as maybe some are. It seems like for a while now, the prevailing thought has been Zach Wilson at number 2. And if that's the case, I'm all in, Mike. Let's get on the the Zach Wilson train, Wall Street Wilson, Zach the Ripper, whatever Jet fans are calling him.
Is that a thing? Wall Street Wilson? Is that
it's better than Mormon Mahomes, which I have said over and over again. We're not putting the Mahomes label on Zach Wilson.
That's a little much. I was kind of amused, and I tweeted as such in the last 20 minutes that there were a substantial number of people that felt like the Jets should keep Darnold and kind of build around him, but they never justified it by saying, hey, Sam Darnold is better than Zach Wilson, Justin Fields, Trey Lance. They justified it by saying, oh, Adam Gase is a terrible coach. Darnold played behind a bad offensive line. Oh, his skill guys weren't very good. It was never like, it was all about the reasons, the excuses, the justifications. It was never that, hey, Darnold is just better. And that to me is what the analysis had to be for the Jets. Like if they were going to keep Darnold, then I think the standard, given the differential in contracts, should have been that Sam Darnold is better than Zach Wilson and Justin Fields. And I don't think they feel that way.
Absolutely. And here's the thing. Say they traded out and kept Darnold. I mean, Mike, you know this better than anyone. First 3 and out of the season at MetLife Stadium. What do you think the MetLife Stadium crowd's doing to Sam Darnold and the Jets?
Yep, they're booing him right away. And that's a little factor as well. You don't want to make decisions based on fans, but that's a little factor in there.
Yeah, like that's why you couldn't keep Darnold unless you were so confident he's your guy long term. If you felt like, yeah, he still has a chance to be pretty good, and clearly they do. I mean, I take the Jets at face value when they say they like the talent of Darnold. We all do. That's why every Jet fan was so excited when he fell to number 3 in the draft in the first place. Yep. But it's too big of a risk to stick with the guy. So to get a 2nd round pick and a 4th round pick next year, I think that's a great return. I want to get back to that, Mike. I mean, originally we heard from Adam Schefter at the very beginning of the offseason, maybe they could get a late 1. I never felt that was realistic once some of the quarterback needing teams made moves elsewhere. But to get a number 2 and a number 4, to put yourself now in position with 22 total draft picks over the next 2 years. I mean, the Jets are set up now. If Joe Douglas is as good of a GM as some Jet fans like to think he is, and I'm a believer in Joe D, then the Jets have no excuse not to build a really good team over the next few years around this rookie quarterback, probably Zach Wilson.
Yeah, you look at quarterback compensation with trades this offseason. So Matt Stafford goes for essentially 2 first-round picks in 2022 and 2023. You have a trade up with San Francisco, so that's more about the draft pick value. I think the hope maybe during the season was that the Jets could get like a late 1 or some kind of early 2. I think the deeper this went on and the more teams started kind of like filling their quarterback holes, I was kind of hoping for some kind of 2nd round pick. I was hoping for not just like a 3 and a 4. And they don't get much this year. It's only a 6th round pick, so that's not much. But then next year, and again, you apply the discount rate. A 2nd rounder next year is usually worth a 3rd rounder this year. But once you get to 2022, you have a 2nd round pick. So you'll have 2 of those. You'll have another 4th round pick, so you'll have 2 of those. So I think it's pretty solid value, especially considering at this point, everyone basically knew, Jake, that the Jets were going to take a quarterback at number 2. So I don't think that Joe Douglas was necessarily negotiating from a position of strength, given that Carolina, like by virtue of the fact that you're on the phone with the Jets, they're taking a quarterback at number 2.
And I think that's part of where this report came out from, Jeremy Fowler of ESPN that, they might not trade Darnold. They might just keep him and draft the quarterback anyway. I think this was all a ploy to try and get Sam's value, to be as high as it possibly could, because the reality is there's no scenario where the Jets were ever going to go into training camp with Darnold still on the roster with a rookie behind him. It wouldn't make any sense. No doubt about that. Maury writes in here on YouTube, did both teams win the trade? I think the Jets won the trade because they got value for Sam in a market that didn't seem like it was truly there. And Mike, you kind of talked about this. We both think Carolina's a pretty good fit to maximize what Sam Darnold could do pretty well.
I agree. Now, I know that Carolina fans might be nervous because they'll go and look at the numbers and say, hey, wait a second. Wasn't Teddy Bridgewater a lot better than Sam Darnold was in 2020? And they would be correct. But Carolina had obviously decided that Teddy wasn't going to be the guy moving forward. And so they had to uncover some sort of young guy with a lot of potential. That's what Sam Darnold has. Because of the 49ers trade up to number 3, all of a sudden the quarterbacks are going to go 1, 2, 3. Carolina's at 8. So if they were going to move up to 4, they're going to have to give up more draft capital, and that would be trading with Atlanta. So I don't even know if that would necessarily work given the division rival factor there. And so Carolina, with Deshaun Watson ostensibly off the market for now, like they were in a really weird spot. Peter King wrote this morning, Jake, that, one of his points on the 10 things he thinks, he was like, hey, I don't know what Carolina is going to do at quarterback. And I think that was the result of San Francisco and the Deshaun Watson deal, that they were kind of in like no man's land. And so that they felt like this was kind of a good, like not overly risky play to get some upside at quarterback. And I think it makes sense for them. Absolutely.
Yeah. I go back to the original trade that the Niners made, and everyone was talking about San Fran and what they're going to do, and the Dolphins loading up with all these picks and whatnot. And then the Eagles made a move. But Carolina was the real loser of that trade because they were basically blocked off now from getting one of these quarterbacks. If they wanted to move up to 4, who knows if Atlanta would even listen because they're in the same division. And at 5, if they moved with the Bengals, they might be too late to even get one of these quarterbacks they wanted. So, Sam Darnold gives them, I believe, a chance to find their franchise guy for what is relatively a low cost if Sam ends up being what they think he could be, right? I mean, if you only had to give up a second and a fourth and you found your quarterback at age 23 for the next 10 plus years, you feel good about, that trade in the long haul. I do have right here in front of me, Mike, the Jets total picks for over the next 2 years. I'm just going to read out some of the numbers here because when you see it in Twitter form, it really just exemplifies what Joe Douglas's plan has been since he took the job in June of 2019. He has said he wanted to be patient and build through the draft. Well, now this year, the Jets have the 2nd pick in the draft, the 23rd pick in the draft, the 34th pick in the draft, the 66th pick in the draft, and the 86th pick in the draft. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 picks in the top 100. Next year, the Jets have 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks, a 3rd-round pick, a 4th-round pick, 2 5th-round picks, and 3 6th-round picks. The Jets are now in prime position. If they get it right, they got to hit on the picks. We know this. But if they hit on these picks, there's no excuse why next year the Jets aren't competing, to consistently go to the playoffs year after year. I'm not going to put that on them this year with a rookie quarterback, but you're supposed to win when your quarterback's on a rookie contract. And now the Jets have the assets to hopefully build around this rookie quarterback to put them in position, to win a lot of football games going forward, which is something we have not been able to say for about a decade as a Jets fan.
Again, it's not like if and when the Jets take Zach Wilson at 2, that's the only pick they have. They have all those other assets that Jake mentioned in order to build up the rest of the roster and continue to do that. Quick side note, kind of getting us back to the compensation part. So Carson Wentz was the name I was forgetting. So here's what the Eagles got for Carson Wentz. Remember, they got a 2021 3rd-round pick. Okay, so kind of sandwiched in between the Jets, like 2 and 4 next year. They also got that conditional 2022 2nd-rounder that I think has a pretty good chance to turn into a 1st-round pick. So based on that, I think the Jets got a little bit less for Darnold than the Eagles got for Wentz, but Wentz is somebody who is playing at an MVP level, which Darnold never approached. And Wentz also had a couple of other solid / above average seasons. That's what they got for him. Granted, he's more expensive for Indianapolis, but I think that's a nice cross comparison to use when we're grading how much the Jets got and what Carolina gave up.
Let's get your take on the quarterback pick at number 2, Mike, because I've been outspoken. I want Wilson, but I'm not upset if they chose Justin Fields. The debate's not going to go for is now going to move to which quarterback should they take 2nd overall. It seems like Wilson is the prevailing thought from most people connected to what the Jets are thinking there. If you're Joe Douglas, what would you do with the 2nd pick? Would you go Zach Wilson or Justin Fields?
I would go with Zach Wilson because I like his arm. I like his ability to make plays off schedule. I like his ability to make throws from different platforms. I'd be scared off not so much by his competition, but more so just the fact that he was hurt in 2019 and he doesn't have a big frame. And so this is a guy, he's going to prove that he can stay healthy. Fields, I could see going in a lot of different directions because when you look at Justin Fields, this guy is 6'3". He's built well. He runs a legit 4.4. He's got a good arm. He was productive at a top college program against elite competition. There were times where it felt like he was a bit mechanical, and when things weren't on, like he couldn't really rev them up for whatever reason. So I do have a fear that if the Jets pass on Fields, all of a sudden he starts out next season somewhere and he's playing like Justin Herbert did. I could see that being the case, but Wilson feels like between his arm strength, his personality, he feels like he's got a little bit of magic about him. I would take him with a little bit of reservation, but ultimately, like, you got to put your chips in the middle of the table at some point. And I think Wilson is the slightly safer play at number 2.
Now, Dwayne writes in that Fields has faced better competition than Zach Wilson. That to me might be true, but that's on the Jets to determine whether or not, how that plays in when they're evaluating the prospects, right? Like, who did Josh Allen play against before he became, now a star in the NFL? Like, the hardest thing to do in sports is to find a franchise quarterback. A lot of times there's no rhyme or reason to who's good and who's not. Let's just hope the Jets and Joe Douglas have an eye for evaluating quarterback talent. Douglas was the same guy that got the Ravens to draft Joe Flacco back in 2008. So at least he has an eye for quarterback talent. Hopefully he's right again with Zach Wilson.
Yeah, I hope so too. And when you look at, Josh Allen, for example, you can look at some of the games that he played against top competition and you'd be like, my God, this is terrifying. He played Iowa in 2017 on the road at Kinnick, and he completed 57% and threw no touchdowns and 2 picks. And it took a while, but he has developed into a far better quarterback. So I think the point is taken by Dwayne. There's no argument. Justin Fields played better competition than Zach Wilson. Nobody can argue that. But it doesn't mean that Justin Fields will be the better NFL quarterback.
It's just crazy this finally happened, Mike. It's yes. Surreal. I want to show people watching. Hold on 1 second. I'm running to my room right now. I'm taping this from my apartment. I want to show my fellow Jet fans my jersey collection, which another one now bites the dust. Give me 10 seconds, Michael.
Okay. All right. I'm intrigued. I actually have I think I might need to get my Sam Darnold shirt. I have a shirt that says, it's like a vanity shirt. It says, "Save us, Sam." I might actually wear it tonight when we hang out. Like, I think I've gotten too fat for it, but I might wear it. But Jake, I think you have more expensive stuff that might need to be like donated to Goodwill or something.
Yes, if anyone wants some Jets jerseys, I'm your guy. First, we bring on the Jamal Adams jersey, a thrilling jersey. You can't see it in the camera shot, but I have a signed helmet from Jamal that's in my apartment living room. All right, the next jersey here, Michael. Now we bring on the Le'Veon Bell jersey.
Well, that's on you, Jake. That was a bad purchase. That was a bad decision on your part. I don't know if that was a gift or not. That was a bad choice.
No, these were all purchases. These were all terrible ideas that I had. And here's the last one, fellow Jet fans.
Here's the last one. Here.
Rest in peace to the Sam Darnold Jets jersey.
Yep.
There it is.
It's kind of sad. There's a sense of sadness about this because Sam was the guy that I was convinced was going to be the answer. Like when Cleveland took Baker Mayfield 3 years ago, I'm like, I can't believe it. The Giants are going to take Saquon Barkley. This is unbelievable. We're going to get the best quarterback prospect in the draft at number 3. Like, what the hell is going on here? And I had this feeling like in the fall, I was like, you know what? If Sam Darnold's not the guy, like this team will never find a franchise quarterback. But, because you're a fan and you like start to think about the future, you're like, you know what? It is what it is. There are good quarterbacks in this draft. At number 2, it makes sense to take one, and hopefully they make the right decision.
I will say this again. If you're just tuning in, I said this at the top. At least Sam's going to a team in the NFC. I think even if you don't like Sam Darnold, the player, you thought it was the right move to move on and trade him. I think every Jet fan would agree Sam Darnold was dealt a shit hand. Sam Darnold was dealt and put in a terrible situation with 2 brutal head coaches, one of them one of the worst in the history of the NFL, in Adam Gase, and that Sam always took everything in stride. He never made excuses. He never put the organization on blast. He's a likable dude. He's 23 years old. I hope he goes. Yeah, I hope he plays well with Carolina. I do. I don't know if it's going to work out. That's not for me to worry about anymore. But I will say this: anytime there's a Panther game on TV, Michael, I will be rooting for the Carolina Panthers, and the Jets play the Panthers. I saw on the schedule next year, so we could get a chance for a Sam Darnold revenge game against the Jets.
Yeah, wouldn't that be something apropos? It's weird. It's weird being a fan because this is where it might be better off just like not being a fan because like I want Sam to do well out of my heart. And yet I feel like I can't root for him to do too well because I'm like, oh my God, the Jets have done this wrong again, and add this to the litany of mistakes in the last 45 years.
Schefter also just took time to tweet out the fact that the Jets have to update their ticket information because they put Sam Darnold on the 2021 ticket info banner on the website, which as if that had any bearing on what the Jets were thinking in regards to what they were going to do in the draft and with Sam Darnold at quarterback.
Was that the most ridiculous storyline of the weekend? Like, yeah, they're going to have Sam as their quarterback because of this stupid website deal. Come on. Are you kidding me?
All right, couple minutes left here of this. If you have a question, football related or a comment, write them in now. We'll answer as many as we could get to here. I saw one pop up from someone that wrote in. I'm trying to find it here. Here it is. Any chance the Jets move up from pick number 23? This is from Papo2689. I think if there's a player they really like, Papo, they have the ammunition to do it. I don't know who that player is. It depends on how the board kind of falls, but they have obvious needs at corner and interior offensive line. So if there's someone they really like that they don't think will be there at 23 that's hanging out in the teens, the Jets are in position to go and get that player. That's what some of these trades over the last couple of years have done. 22 picks over the next 2 drafts for Joe Douglas and the Jets.
I tend to think they'll probably avoid a trade-up if they can and keep as many of their picks. But yeah, I think if there's a guy that they love at those spots that are convinced can start right away, I could see them doing it.
Will the Jets finally have a quarterback throw over 4,000 yards next season? Solomon Jets 718 writes in, Mike.
Well, boy, you got 17 games. It helps. I'm gonna say no, just because it's the safe bet. But you could easily see it happening. I would say my biggest question, honestly, like you don't even have to be good to throw for 4,000 yards. It's can you actually stay healthy and be playing at a somewhat competent level?
Not as important. My next question, Mike, but who's the backup quarterback for this team? Because now that Sam's gone, they have to get
James
a veteran.
Morgan?
I guess 4th round pick James Morgan is now the guy on this team. I mean, like who's out there that they could bring in? I guess Alex Smith could make some sense. I thought Jacksonville would have been perfect for Alex Smith because of the Urban Meyer connection, but Alex Smith as a backup, I don't know if he would take it. I'm sure he wants to start still, but
I would take that.
They need someone like that to kind of be a mentor to Zach Wilson or Justin Fields. I think it's going to be Wilson, first year in the league. That's kind of what they need to look at.
All right, I'm going to look at who is still available at the quarterback position. That's definitely one that stands out right now, Alex Smith. As far as someone who could like be a good mentor, let's see here. Robert Griffin, Josh McCown, too old. Yeah, I would say Alex Smith is the one that right now makes the most sense. AJ McCarron, I guess that's okay. Matt Barkley, Nate Sudfeld stinks. Geno Smith not happening. Yeah, I think Alex Smith would make a lot of sense in this situation. He also played at Utah. I know that's like a rival of BYU, obviously, Holy War, the whole deal, but maybe there's some, scenarios. Utah, he both played college in Utah, got the Utah connection.
Isn't that like, I don't know if it's a word, is that derogatory to talk about, just connecting Utah and BYU? Do the Mormons like that? I don't know.
I'm not sure. I was wondering the same thing.
Joey B writes in, Jake, what's up, man? Listening in from Colorado.
Excellent.
Darnold, surprised the Broncos did not make an offer on him. That's actually a very good point. We talked about some other teams that could have been in on Sam earlier. We didn't talk about Denver. If you would have told me a week ago, where's Darnold playing? I would have said either Denver or Carolina. Denver's an interesting team now. They have Drew Lock on their roster. They're not picking high enough to truly go up and get a quarterback unless one falls to them at number 9, I believe they are in the draft. What are the Broncos going to do at quarterback? Are they just going to run it back with Drew Lock for another year, or could they maybe be in on a trade up and maybe go up a spot to number 8 if they had to now with Carolina, if they needed to get their quarterback and block them from going to another team that might try and move up a few spots to number 8 with Carolina?
It's a weird deal with Denver because I do feel like it's a team that can really win. I know they're kind of blocked a bit in the division by Kansas City, but they have a lot of talent. They have a defense that was playing well by the end of the last season, a lot of good skill positions. And I think ultimately, like, they probably have their own version of Sam Darnold in Drew Lock, just probably a little bit less talented. And so they probably didn't want to invest the same things and assets that Carolina did in getting a guy like Sam Darnold. So I think for them, it's either could I see them moving up the board or maybe somehow getting a quarterback at 9? I think that's possible, but it does feel like they might kind of ride things out this year with Drew Lock and then kind of like reload, and maybe 2022 is the year for Denver to make the investment at quarterback.
Mike, we've been going for almost 40 minutes here, so let's kind of wrap it up with some final thoughts. A bunch of people just tuning in. Thanks to the 237 people that are watching this live, including 226 on YouTube. That's a record for me, so certainly appreciate you all taking time to tune in to listen to us react to this trade with Darnold in real time. Final thoughts on the deal, Mike. Did the Jets get what they needed to get from Darnold? And where are you at right now with this team? Are you excited about the idea of taking a quarterback number 2 and seeing what the Jets do for the remainder of this offseason?
All right, here are my rapid fire takes. I think Joe Douglas got solid, not great value for Sam Darnold. They get most of the value in 2022, so you always have to apply like that little discount there because it's next year, not this year. But when the calendar flips next year, the Jets will have 2 second-round picks, 2 fourth-round picks. They'll have a 6th this year. So I think it's solid, not great. It obviously paves the way to take a quarterback at number 2. I think we all kind of assumed that was happening. It's probably going to be Zach Wilson. That's what I would do. I'm excited, but I'm also going to be cautious here because I was super excited about Sam Darnold 3 years ago. So I'm going to go in with like reserved optimism at this point. For Carolina, this makes sense because you didn't give up a whole lot for Sam Darnold. I am curious about the idea of like picking up that fifth-year option for 2022 because it is fully guaranteed now, not just for injury. And I look at that situation and I say, it's a chance. The risk is like if Teddy Bridgewater's there at training camp, like ostensibly Sam's going to be the starter now, but is he definitely better than Teddy Bridgewater? I'm not so sure about that. And Carolina, I'm guessing there's a little sadness in that they were, all hot to trot for Deshaun Watson. That's what all the tea leaves said. And I think they have pulled out of those quote unquote sweepstakes, which are now on ice because of Deshaun's litany of legal issues right now.
That's a great point. We should hit on that real quick. The fact that the Deshaun Watson, legal issues came up when they did, that basically removed Deshaun from being traded to any of these teams. And I think
so.
Carolina making this move, I think, is yet another indication that if Deshaun's playing football in 2021, he'd have to be playing for the Texans. I really don't think there's any scenario now where the Texans could move him. And even if they, want to move him eventually, he might be placed on the commissioner's exempt list, and then who knows how long this legal process could take. Mike, you're also a lawyer for those who maybe are unaware of that. So you could speak to the Watson stuff real quick here as we wrap up. Your overall take on where we're at with Watson and how that impacts all these moves we've seen from other teams that need quarterbacks.
Well, from a legal standpoint, so we had a development Friday where Deshaun Watson, there's now been a police report, a criminal complaint filed against him. And so the Houston Police Department is investigating. We'll see. I mean, they'll do their investigation. I don't know how long it'll take. And then it'll be up to the DA to figure out, do they feel like they have enough evidence to prosecute or not? And so I think from a football standpoint, this is all going to take a while. And I think the draft, the whole offseason has been like the major inflection point for the Texans. I think before all this, I think they probably were resigned to the fact that they probably would have traded him like right around draft week. But now this has totally changed the calculus. Like maybe I'm off here, but I cannot see a team trading for Watson right now because if you are like affirmatively proactively trading for Watson, you're basically saying by executing the trade, hey, all these 22 women are lying and this criminal complainant is lying. If you make that trade now, that is what you're saying. Now, I'm not going to even go as far as Jake said about 2021. I have no idea. Maybe there's some kind of resolution or some progress made in May, June, July, August. We shall see. But right now, while all this is swirling with like no end in sight right now, I can't see any team being willing to trade Watson until there's further clarity about what may have happened, what has happened, what didn't happen, and whether he can start to resolve some of these issues or not.
And that's why Carolina now has Sam Darnold on their team as their quarterback. And poor Teddy Bridgewater, man. He's got to compete with Sam Darnold yet again. I mean, Teddy can't get away from Sam, Mike.
Oh, that's definitely true. I feel bad for Teddy. It's weird. They brought him in, Carolina did this past year. He played, I think, okay, but it's clear that Dave Tepper, after a couple of years of owning that team, he's got that wandering eye for a young franchise quarterback, which Teddy is not at this point.
Which I guess we will see if Sam is that guy for them at age 23. So thanks to everyone who watched. Mike, where could people find you? I know you're on Twitter at Mike Meltser. When are you on Sirius next? Plug yourself to everyone that tuned in.
Absolutely. At Mike Meltser on Twitter with an S, not a Z. Also, I'll be on Sirius XM's Mad Dog Radio this upcoming Saturday and Sunday from 3 to 7 p.m. Eastern time. So I look forward to that. And thank you, Jake, for the opportunity.
Mike is a passionate Jet fan. He covers the Texans up close, living here in Houston. He's someone you definitely want to listen to on Sirius, and make sure you follow him on Twitter, as he said, at Mike Meltser with an S, not a Z. I'm on Twitter at Jake Asman. Thanks to everyone who tuned in. This was great. I did not expect the trade to happen today, but I'm glad it did, and we had a chance to react to it kind of in real time here on YouTube. Please subscribe to the channel and spread the word. It goes a long way in helping us build up a following here on the page, and we'll be back anytime something big happens. Enjoy the rest of your Monday. He's Mike. I'm Jake signing off, and we'll see how the Zach Wilson era gets underway here for the Jets. So long, everyone. Thanks for tuning in.